Be sure to like and subscribe to Starbound here on YouTube. It ain't much, but it's honest work. Finally, the humans would pay. The fleet would reach Earth within the hour. Primox Grell snorted. Earth. It was their word for dirt. Primitive lunkers. How had such a worthless species caused so much trouble? You're making a mistake, Grell. Primox Grazen glared at Grell through the view screen. Grazen was a Phylaxian, a short biped with long fur and 3 eyes. Most Phylaxians were orange, but Grazen was so old his fur had turned silver. Grell hated Grazen. Grell hated most of the other Primoxes, but Grazen especially. The old Phylaxian had a way of looking down his snout at everyone. It pissed Grell off. It's not a mistake, Graxon. Primox Grell growled. Grell Azure was a Grotto, a noble of the House Azure. Like Grazen, he was a 2-armed biped, but Grell only had 2 eyes. He was 3 meters tall. His body was covered in blue armored plates. The chitin had been enhanced with ceramic coatings and nanotechnology. All of them had. Primox Grell was an unstoppable force. He could lift 3 tons and he was immune to small arms fire. Even his eyes were protected. Not that Grell would be fighting anyone anytime soon. War was a job for the pores. The humans have caused enough trouble. This ends today. Grell's fleet would see to that. 12 Olgan battle cruisers, 2 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide. Blunt cylinders coated in lead. Heavy weapons protruded from their holes like pustules. They were ugly things. Ugly and implacable and impervious. Just like Grell himself. Involium armor was the densest, strongest substance ever produced by sapiens. A millimeter's worth would make a ship nigh indestructible. The battle cruisers had armor over half a meter thick. Another 2 meters of insulating lead covered the involium on the inside and outside of the hull. It was necessary. Involium was extremely radioactive. Plutonium was harmless in comparison. You're right, said Grazen. It's not one mistake. His expression somehow became even loftier than it was before. It's several mistakes all at once. I always knew you were a fool, Grell, but even I didn't think you were this stupid. Stupid? Grell snarled. Watch your tongue, old friend. Grell and Grazen were not friends. Claiming friendship with an enemy was a grave insult among Grell's people. Grazen knew that. Grell enjoyed watching him scowl. The humans have allied with the Zitst. They're giving the damned bugs lead-thrower weapons. We need to cut off their support before we have another bug hunt. The Zitst? Grazen snorted. You worried about a few thousand bugs hiding in the frontier? He shook his head. No, Grell. There's no reason to lie. This isn't about the Zitst. The other Primoxes all agree with me, Grell told him. It wasn't true. Grazen and 5 other Primoxes had objected, but it was a small minority. Not enough to stop the plan. The humans are a threat. A threat? Grazen nodded gravely. Yes, I suppose they are. The Prims are far more dangerous than we first believed. His look turned sly. But you would know all about that, wouldn't you, old friend? Tell me, is your house still trying to kill the lead dealer? Grell scowled. The lead dealer. That bastard had killed Grell's nephew. Brill Azure had been House Azure's most prominent heir, but the human had gunned him down like a bug. Grottos were a vengeful people. Their nobility more so. House Azure had put a bounty on the Prim's head, sent strike teams and assassins. Instead of hiding and dying like he was supposed to, the lead dealer had killed every death dealer sent his way. The lead dealer was the source of Grell's troubles. House Azure's failure to kill the lunker had brought nothing but shame and ridicule. Azure used to be the greatest house in the kingdom of Grotto, but now they were a laughingstock.
Don't change the subject, Grayson, Grail chided. We both know you only want to stop me to protect your pocketbook. You've been making a fortune selling lead throwers on the black market.
Not as far as anyone can prove, Grayson denied. He folded his arms. But this isn't about money. You haven't dealt with the humans like I have, Grell. You don't know what they're capable of.
I know enough,
Grell growled.
They're primitives, Grayson. They're barely spacefaring, and their weapons are barely better than throwing rocks. They don't even have a unified government for scat's sake.
The most dangerous man in the galaxy is a human, Grayson reminded him, and all he does is throw rocks. The Phylaxian's eyes narrowed. I know that's why you're doing this, Grell. You failed to take revenge on the lead dealer, so you're going after his species instead.
So what if I am?
Grell sneered at the little Primox.
There's nothing you can do to stop me.
It's not me you should be worried about, the Phylaxian said coldly. The humans are divided now, but they'll band together if you attack their world. You've seen what a single human accomplished on the frontier. What will 15 billion of them do once we declare war?
They won't do a damned thing, said Grell. They'll be too busy being dead.
Dead from what? Grayson scoffed. You have what, a dozen warships at your disposal?
One would be enough,
Grell assured him. With in-volume armor and hundreds of highly advanced weapons, a single Olgan-class battlecruiser could wipe out an entire sector's worth of ships. Lone battlecruisers had sterilized planets more than once. The indestructible behemoths were what had let the kingdom of Grotto conquer so many species and create the Federal Union of Worlds in the first place. If you knew anything about humans, Grayson warned, you'd never send less than 1,000.
1,000?
Grell scoffed.
There are only 1,000 Olgan battlecruisers in the whole Federal Union.
Fabricating in volume was an incredibly involved and expensive process. Outfitting a single battlecruiser cost nearly 30 times his homeworld's GDP. Between the expense and their invincibility, the Feds hadn't bothered to make very many of the things.
And you should send them all,
Grayson said firmly.
The humans are a sleeping Kurzog, Grell. They must be crushed immediately and completely, or you'd best not mess with them at all.
Tell your fleet to turn back, while they still can.
You're an idiot, Grayson.
Grell was back to sneering.
We'll take Earth from those primitive lunkers just like we have every other world. We'll clear their skies and spend a few pleasant months bombarding the Prims until our forces arrive to set up slave camps.
Slave camps? The Phylaxian's 3 eyes widened, then narrowed. Oh, you old fool. You're not just doing this for spite, are you? You're working with the syndicate.
Slaves have to come from somewhere, Grell shrugged. We're having trouble getting the bugs of breed in captivity, and taking them from the frontier has proved difficult.
You mean the lead dealer killed the syndicate slavers and took their entire fleet of battle cruisers? Grayson snorted. There's a lesson there, Grell. The humans are not to be trifled with.
All the more reason to wipe them out now, Grell countered. Stop wasting my time, Grayson. You were outvoted. We're doing this.
You're going to regret this, Grell. Primox Grayson shook his head. We all are.
I don't think so,
Grell replied.
The only thing that can take on an Olgan battlecruiser is another Olgan battlecruiser. The humans can't even make Involium. There's not a damn thing they can do to stop us.
If you really thought that, Grayson said quietly, you'd be on one of those ships, not hiding in your office and watching through an Ansible. His voice dripped with disdain. You're a fool and a coward, and you're dooming us all. He cut the transmission. Primarch's grill snorted. Prick. What did he know? The Grotto leaned back in his reinforced chair. His office was lavish. It was big enough to be a house by itself. Priceless artifacts in glass cases were spaced every few feet, creating a walkway that led to a massive platinum desk. The floors, the walls, and tasteful columns were all sheathed in Huda pearl, shimmering like rainbows as they reflected artificial sunlight from the glowing ball in the center of the ceiling. It was big and gaudy and tasteless, just the way Grell liked it. He checked the time. 23 minutes before the fleet exited hyperspace. Just enough time for a snack and a small bottle of Felga wine. The Grotto enjoyed his repast, then reactivated his Ansible. He passed into the sensor feed from the unbreakable Resolve. The Resolve was the flagship for Grell's fleet. It wasn't really any better than the other cruisers, but someone had to be in charge. Grell watched his warships exit hyperspace and got his first look at the solar system that spawned the humans. It didn't look like much. A single star with 8 planets, 1 asteroid belt, a handful of primitive space stations. Grell wondered if they even had artificial gravity. There were more ships in the system than he expected. Nearly 2,000. Most of them were Federal Union vessels, traders. A few dozen clunky human ships patrolled near the space stations, and another small fleet orbited the little blue planet they called home. The human vessels were small, barely fit to fight a landing craft. Pathetic. Grell's fleet had entered real space at the edge of the solar system. Hyperspace didn't play well with gravity. Trying to enter or leave hyperspace near a gravity well was a one-way trip to molecular disassembly. Even Involium couldn't withstand it. As such, it would take most of a day before Grell's warships could attack in earnest. Satisfied with what he was seeing, Grell used the Ansible to open a comm channel.
Admiral Throm, status report.
Throm Azure was a Grotto, a lesser noble and a distant cousin. The man was competent but uptight. Not that Grell minded. He liked a bit of formality now and then.
All ships show systems green, Great Primax. We are beginning our approach.
Grell smiled.
Very good, Admiral. Keep me posted.
The Grotto closed the comm, but left the Ansible connection open. He wanted Throm to be able to contact him if something came up. Grell rose and stretched. Then he had a thought and sat back down. He reopened the comm channel.
Oh, an Admiral?
Yes, Great Primax.
I see a lot of lunkers trading with the enemy.
Grell's smile turned vicious.
Kill as many as you can.
Grell could hear Throm's answering grin.
It will be our pleasure, sir.
The next day was tedious. As a federal Primax, Grell was responsible for governing 3 solar systems, one of which contained a habitable world. The world had a sizable Grotto colony and a few smaller communities of Scarlax and Gizmodo. Grell didn't have to do much, really. He had hired a competent staff and left them to take care of the details. He spent most of his time watching his fleet close in on the humans. The warships managed to blast a few traders out of the sky, but most of the ships were smart enough to avoid his cruisers and fast enough to make chasing them a waste of time. There was one interesting development. A single human vessel had detached from one of the space stations and plotted an intercept course for his fleet. It was small compared to Grell's cruisers, but much bigger than the other human ships. A 300-meter rectangle made sleek with curved edges. Kinetic weapons and missile ports stuck out from the ship, giving it a fearsome appearance. A gun barrel traversed the entire spine of the ship and protruded an extra 10 meters. It was the first thing the humans had shown that resembled a proper warship. As time went on, Grell realized it was the only warship the humans had. Grell wasn't even sure he could call it a warship. The damn thing might as well have been made of paper, missiles, kinetics. It was laughable. Scans showed the frame of the ship was made of tungsten alloys and more tungsten-formed armor nearly a meter thick. It was worthless. A single hit from Grell's warships would spatter that ship like an egg. It didn't even have a proper reactor. It was using nuclear fission for power. Sloppy fission. Why would it need so many generators otherwise? Grell's workday was nearly done before the humans hailed the unbreakable resolve. Admiral Throm opened a channel. A human voice spoke. "Attention, Federal vessels. This is Captain James Waters of the USS Glorious Purpose. You are in violation of our territory and you have attacked several vessels unlawfully. Stand down now." Admiral Throm opened a channel to Grell. "Do you want to answer, Great Primox?" His grin was eager. "Or should I?" "By all means, Admiral." Grell said graciously, "It's your show." Admiral Throm nodded appreciatively and responded to the humans. "Glorious Purpose, this is Admiral Throm Azure of the Unbreakable Resolve. You have no territory to violate and no laws to break. We are here to kill you and take your planet in the name of the Federation Union of Worlds. Surrender now and your crew will be spared." The Admiral sneered. "Or you can try to resist. I hope you do. It's more fun that way." The Admiral ended the transmission. The Glorious Purpose started transmitting again, talking to one of the space stations, or maybe Earth itself. Grell could have arranged to listen in, but he didn't bother. A few minutes later, the humans hailed Admiral Throm again. "Unbreakable Resolve, this is Captain Waters again." The human's voice was brisk, businesslike. "Be advised, continuing on your current course will be seen as an act of war by the European Union and our allied nations. Stand down now, or you will be fired upon." Grell snorted. The human had gigs. Grell would give him that much. Most species would be pissing their pants at the sight of even one Olgan battlecruiser. Captain Waters was threatening to take on 12 of them. 12 invincible ships, and he wanted to fight them with rocks. Did he not know what involium was? Was he stupid? Admiral Throm answered. "I was hoping you'd say that, human. Try to stop us if you think you've got the gigs." The Admiral switched off the comms and ordered, "Battle stations, charge weapons and prepare a firing solution. Let's blast those primitive lunkers out of the sky." Primox Grell relished the sight of his flagship preparing for battle. The Unbreakable Resolve thrummed with the power of charging plasma cannons and molecular disintegration arrays. 10 seconds after Throm's transmission, one of his officers reported, "All weapons charged and..." The feed cut out. Grell blinked in confusion. He tried to reconnect to the Unbreakable Resolve. The connection failed. What in the lowest? Grell tried to connect to a different ship. He found the crew of the Implacable Fury in a panic. The captain, a Scarlac named Cthorn, was screaming orders. Scarlacs were yellow, six-legged insects. Their upper bodies resembled a small, scrawny grotto, but their heads were all bug eyes and mandibles. Captain Cthorn was so caught up in bellowing commands he took a moment to notice Grell's call.
"Cthorn!"
Grell hollered.
"What in the lowest dimension just happened?"
"The Unbreakable Resolve!"
Cthorn shouted back.
"It just exploded! The whole ship's gone!"
"What?"
Grell stared at his view screen.
"How? We don't know, Great Primox!"
Scarlac's antennas were waving violently. He was terrified.
"We're taking evasive maneuvers, but, Captain..."
One of the officers interrupted.
The unstoppable force is gone. I can't tell what hit it.
The Scarlax swore. Normally, Grell would chastise the creature for losing decorum like that, but he was busy swearing himself.
Patch me into the sensors,
the Primox ordered. One of the bridge officers complied. Primox Grell scrolled through the sensor feeds, trying to suss out what was happening. The USS Glorious Purpose was 7,000 kilometers away from the fleet. It was strafing away at an angle, trying to circle Grell's ships and keep its distance. Shrapnel and debris were flying in all directions from where two of the battlecruisers used to be. The sight made Grell stop and stare for a moment. That should not be possible. He'd never heard of a weapon that could pierce in-volume armor in one shot. He couldn't imagine what kind of force you need to shatter an Olgan battlecruiser to pieces. The remaining 10 warships were scrambling. Lances of red and green light pulsed from them. Molecular disintegration beams and heavy disruptor cannons. Spheres of white antimatter spat from the oil guns in rapid barrage. Useless. At 7,000 kilometers, the Glorious Purpose had more than enough time for a leisurely dodge. None of it would touch the human ship. The plasma casters might do better. The fiery balls of ionized gas were slower than disruptor cannons, almost as slow as the antimatter. They were still fast enough to catch the Glorious Purpose. More importantly, they were guided. The plasma was held together by an ionic field projected by the warships, and that ionic field would lead the burning projectiles wherever they needed to go. The human ship wouldn't be able to dodge them. Primox Grell opened a channel to the remaining warship.
Increase power to the plasma casters, he ordered. Those lunkers are too far away for anything else. Cut power to the other weapons and redirect it to the engines. We need to close in.
9 of the remaining 10 battlecruisers acknowledged his orders. The last one didn't answer. Primox Grell considered shouting at them, but decided it would be a waste of time. Instead, he watched the balls of searing plasma home in on the humans. The Glorious Purpose moved with surprising grace for such a primitive ship. It easily outmaneuvered the incoming fire. The plasma spheres would present more of a challenge, but they wouldn't reach the humans for another minute. Grell noticed a large buildup of energy in the enemy vessel. Very large. The energy was cycling through the back of the oversized gun that ran the length of the ship. As Grell watched, all the energy discharged at once in a massive electromagnetic flare. The Glorious Purpose bucked, thrown backwards from the recoil of its massive gun. The projectile was so fast Grell barely got a scan. The damn thing had been launched at 612 kilometers per second. It was heading for
inexorable fate,
Grell shouted at the warship.
Dodge! Dodge now!
The inexorable fate was already trying to move. It was too slow. The warship would have been large and unwieldy even without the involume. With the armor, it was far too massive to overcome its inertia in the time it had. The round struck the battlecruiser. It punched through the armor and out the other side. The inexorable fate blew into fragments 2 seconds later.
What the lower?
Grell breathed. He pulled up the scan of the human projectile. It was a simple thing. 1 ton of carbonated steel, shaped like a bullet. The bullet was tipped with a large diamond. In the center of the projectile was a large canister. Grell recognized the canister. It was an antimatter containment module. Each of his warships had a module exactly like it. The canister would be filled with compressed antimatter. Gods below, Grell could see what had happened now. The projectile had ruptured when it punched through the involume. The canister had breached, ejecting 2 tons of compressed antimatter into the battlecruiser. The antimatter had mixed with the atmosphere and materials of the ship. Matter and antimatter had annihilated each other, releasing enough energy to destroy a moon.
Those goddamned crazy prims,
Grell muttered to himself. What kind of idiot would try to launch an entire canister of antimatter at such speeds? How had those primitives managed such a thing without blowing themselves to the lowest dimension? Grell shook his head. It didn't matter now. The humans had a weapon that could destroy an Olgan battlecruiser with a single shot. It was impossible, ridiculous, but there it was. Grayson had been right. Grell should have sent every ship the Fed could muster. The glorious purpose continued to strafe and dodge. It was charging its electromagnetic slug thrower again. How much time before it could fire? 10 seconds? 30? It couldn't be much over a minute. The fight had started 3 minutes ago, and 3 of Grell's Olgans were clouds of expanding molten debris. 1 minute, Grell decided. It would take them 1 minute to fire again. The human cannon had been charging for 20 seconds when the first of the plasma spheres reached it. The glorious purpose tried to dodge, but the plasma changed course to follow it. Good. The humans might be able to dish out some damage, but their little warship couldn't take it. 1 hit was all it would take. The plasma spheres started to explode. Grell leaned forward, eager to examine the wreckage of his enemy. He frowned. It was too soon. The closest sphere should still be 10 seconds from the humans.
What the?
Another sphere exploded. Grell zoomed the sensors in. Was that? Grell swore. Missiles. The humans were launching missiles at the plasma spheres. The primitive explosives would have been useless against Fed warships, but they had no problem disrupting the ionic fields that held the plasma spheres together. The spheres were bursting, releasing ionized gas in all directions. The glorious purpose moved out of the plasma's path. Some of it would splash against the vessel, but not enough to eat through its tungsten armor. The human ship would be fine. God damn it. Grell's fist slammed through the top of his platinum desk. How many missiles did those lunkers have? Would they run out before they managed to kill the rest of his fleet? Grell doubted it. He only had 9 ships left. 9 ships, 9 minutes. What could he do? He had to kill that ship. Once the glorious purpose was dead, there would be nothing left to stop him. All he had to do was kill it within the next 8 minutes. As long as a single Olgan battlecruiser survived, he would win. But how? The human ship was too fast, too mobile. His warships would never land a hit in time. The solution hit the Primox like a bolt of lightning. He got back on the comms.
All ships, he ordered. Launch your fighters. Launch all your fighters. The human ship is unarmored. Your fighters can blast them out of the sky.
It took a minute for his fleet to comply. By the time they did, the implacable fury was an expanding cloud of debris. Primox Grell had to connect to a different ship. He chose the overwhelming force. When he got a good look at the sensor feeds, he smiled. Each of the battle cruisers had carried 20 smaller fighter craft. Smaller was a relative term. The ships were between 40 and 100 meters long. There were now 180 fighter craft speeding towards the glorious purpose. The fighters were fast, much faster than the human ship. Their cannons were not as powerful as those wielded by Grell's battle cruisers, but they would be more than enough for a barely armored flying gun. The humans saw their death coming. They reacted with professional efficiency. Their big gun fired again, destroying another battlecruiser. The lunkers kept launching missiles to destroy plasmaspheres. The other 60 guns protruding from the ship opened fire as well. They were smaller versions of the big gun. Steel slugs fired at extreme velocity by magnetic accelerators. The slugs were much smaller and slower, a mere 10 kilograms launched at 60 kilometers per second. They didn't contain antimatter. There were an awful lot of them, though. The fighters took evasive maneuvers. They were far enough away that dodging should be trivial, but the steel slugs were fast and numerous and hard to track. A few of them hit their marks. The fighter ships were not armored with embolium. The steel slingers of the humans would tear through them like paper. Primox Grell smiled. It didn't matter. It would take 5 whole minutes for the slugs to reach his fighters. In 4 minutes, the fighters would be too close for the glorious purpose to dodge. Disruptor cannons and antimatter would tear it apart, and there was nothing the Prims could do to stop it.
What the scat?
The voice of the overwhelming forces captain cut through the Primox's glee.
What's doing that?
What was doing what? Grell didn't waste time asking the question out loud. He scrolled back through the sensor feed. Fighter ships were shutting down. No, they were being disabled. It wasn't the steel slugs of the glorious purpose doing it. Grell looked closer. Something was boring holes in his ships, putting holes in the reactors. As he watched, a hole punched into an antimatter module, blowing the entire ship to dust. What the scat was putting holes in his ships? More projectiles? Grell didn't see any. Grell looked closer. The area around the holes was hot. Very hot. Like they'd been hit by a thin stream of plasma. Only it couldn't be plasma. Grell would have seen it.
Lasers!
One of the crewmen shouted.
They're using lasers!
Lasers? Grell snarled. Focus light, of course. The Prims didn't have the technology for proper energy weapons, but any idiot could make a laser. They were crap weapons. A laser's energy requirements far exceeded their damage output. No one in the Fed bothered with the things. It made sense, Grell supposed. The humans were dung-sniffing primitives. Their primary method of combat was throwing rocks at people. Of course they'd resort to lasers. It's not like they had the know-how to build proper guns. The question was, where were the lasers coming from? Not the glorious purpose. It didn't have enough power to fire a laser and charge its big gun at the same time. Grell panned the sensors out. He looked for an energy source. There, ships, 20 of them. Each of the human vessels was 100 meters long. They were thin, triangular things like the glorious purpose. They were powered by nuclear fission. Each had 4 reactors, and they were all running hot. The energy the reactors produced was harnessed into an array that spanned most of the interior of the ships. The array focused the energy into a single point, producing a focused beam of light. Grell checked the distance. The enemy ships were 300,000 kilometers away, a full light second, much too far to hit with the weapons he had. The 1 second delay would not be enough to let Grell's fighters dodge the laser beams. Federal Union fighters were agile, but not that agile. Still, it was worth a try.
All fighters, full evasives!
Primox Grell shouted into the comms.
Full evasives! The Prims are using laser weapons from 1 light second away. You have to survive long enough to kill those human pricks, damn you!
Most of the fighters heeded the Primox's orders. It didn't help. One after another, Grell's ships were disabled or destroyed. They tried to shoot down the human warship. Some of the idiots even tried to shoot at the laser ships so far away. It was all pointless. It would have taken 4 minutes to get close enough to prevent the glorious purpose from evading their fire. The last fighter was destroyed in just under 3. The glorious purpose fired again. Another of Grell's precious battle cruisers was blasted out of the sky. Primox Grell slumped. His warships were still throwing everything they had at the glorious purpose, but the damned humans were too far away. Only the guided plasma spheres were coming close, but missiles were detonating them too soon. There was nothing he could do. That prick Grayson had been right. He should have sent more ships. He should have sent all of them. When there were only 2 battle cruisers left, the glorious purpose buckled. The human ship tore open as it fired the big gun. Primox Grell bolted upright. A surge of hope flashed through him. It must be the recoil, he realized. The electromagnetic accelerator was launching slugs with terrific force. The backlash must be tearing apart the ship's frame. By the low gods, Grell might win after all. The antimatter-packed slug hit 11 seconds later. Grell lost his connection yet again. He had the Ansible connect him to his very last warship, the Everlasting Triumph. He passed into the sensors and gazed with glee at the listing human vessel. The Glorious Purpose had lost 2 reactors. There were hull breaches throughout the ship. Several of its missile ports were inoperative, along with half of its smaller magnetic accelerator cannons. It was still trying to charge its big gun. It wouldn't get the chance. Primox Grell spoke eagerly into the comms.
Keep firing and close in. Kill those humans before they get that gun working again.
The captain of the Everlasting Triumph was a Phylaxian. Grell didn't remember his name. The captain acknowledged the order, too polite to point out he'd already been doing everything Grell had just said. The Triumph moved in for the kill. The Glorious Purpose was too damaged to move. Just a few seconds more, and a disruptor or molecular disintegration beam would tear it to pieces. Primox Grell tapped into the Everlasting Triumph's comms. He hailed the Glorious Purpose.
It was a good fight, lunkers. You've got gigs for days. Too bad you only got the one ship, Grell smiled. Best of luck in the next dimension.
The Glorious Purpose replied, "This is Captain Waters. One ship is enough. I'll see you in hell." Then the Glorious Purpose exploded. Primox Grell smiled. He'd done it. Half a second later, a molecular disintegration beam tore through the shattered hull of the human vessel. Grell frowned. Wait, if the beam was only hitting now... He checked the sensors. The Glorious Purpose had fired its big gun one last time. Grell's last battle cruiser was desperately trying to dodge. It was pointless. The Primox spent 10 despairing seconds watching the antimatter-packed slug approach. Then the feed cut out. All of his ships were gone. Grell stared at his blank screen. 12 Olgan battle cruisers. The Federal Union had never lost so many ships at once. It shouldn't be possible. How had everything gone so wrong? 30 seconds later, Primox Grell received a call. It was Grayson again. The old Phylaxian stared at the Grotto with disdain. "I warned you what would happen, Grell."
Shut up, Grayson.
The Grotto said wearily.
We lost the fleet, but the human ship is dead. They don't have another. We'll send more ships. They won't stop us next time.
Grell, you idiot. Primox Grayson hissed. Did you look at the sensor feed? At the stations? The stations. Grell pulled up the recordings on his console. He looked at one of the human stations. It was big and clunky and primitive. What was he... Oh, scat. The station was a shipyard. There were 3 ships under construction. They were almost complete. They were almost identical to the Glorious Purpose.
The Glorious Purpose was a prototype, Grayson explained. A successful prototype. The humans are building more. 3 will be complete within a month. 20 more 6 months after that. Planet Earth's a long ways away, Grell. Can you get another fleet in position before the humans are ready? No, he couldn't. It would take 2 months for the closest fleet to get there, and that force would only have 8 ships. Grell glared at the Silver Phylaxian. You warned them we were coming, didn't you?
I didn't have to warn them, you goddamned moron, Grayson snapped. That warship was built 4 years ago. It won first place at my weapons exposition. Did you even read the files I sent? Primox Grell had not. He sneered at Grayson.
I've never been interested in anything you had to say.
Grell had ignored similar correspondence from Primox Frel Viridian. Frel was another Grotto, but his house had been an enemy of House Azure for decades. He deleted both sets of files on principle. He knew now that it had been a mistake, but he'd never admit such a thing out loud. You still don't understand, do you, Grell? The old Phylaxian glared through the screen with weary disgust. You thought the lead dealer was an outlier, a random act of the gods. He's not. The lead dealer is a cautionary tale, a warning. Grayson made a fist. Humans are dangerous. They look stupid and primitive and weak. Most of them probably are, but they're the most dangerous species the Federal Union has ever encountered, and you just declared war on them.
Don't be so dramatic, Grayson.
Primox Grell glowered right back.
They're primitives, barely spacefaring. There are only 15 billion of the lungers. We'll crush them just like we've crushed everyone else.
That's the point you're missing, Grill. Primox Grayson lowered his fist and slumped in his chair. The humans aren't like everyone else. They'll come for us now, and they'll make the bug hunt look like a harmless slap fight. He let out a sigh. I tried to warn you. I tried to warn everybody. You didn't listen, and now you've doomed us all. Primox Grayson hung up. Primox Grell sat back in his fancy reinforced chair. He looked around his silent, gaudy office, took in his platinum desk with a hole punched through it. His fleet was gone, enough naval power to destroy 10 star systems, lost to a single human vessel. This was madness. The humans would be coming. Grell might hate Grayson's guts, but he had to admit the other Primox was rarely wrong. The humans were coming, and they might be as dangerous as the Phylaxian said. Primox Grell sat in his chair for a long time, pondering a single, searing question. The humans were coming. What was he supposed to do now?
I hope you enjoyed that story. Click right here to watch another video with the same characters.